Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of Crossing the Finish Line. I am your host, Cody Kaler. I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at ANZ Trucking. Today, we have three very special guests on the show. These three have probably forgotten more about rail and intermodal than I will ever know in my entire life. Between the three of them, they have close to 100 years combined industry experience. So it's safe to describe these guys as industry experts. And with that, I would like to welcome Bill, Paul, and Ted to our show. Hi, guys.
How you doing?
Hey.
Great. All right, guys. You guys ready to talk rail and intermodal?
We'll do the best we can.
Awesome. Well, let's do some quick introductions really quick. Like I said, my name is Cody Kaler. I'm the Senior Vice President over here at ANZ Trucking. We are a premier refrigerated truck brokerage, nationwide coverage. And let's start intros, just alphabetical order is easier for me. So, Bill, let's start with you.
I'm Bill Welker. I've been involved in the produce industry and in the intermodal and rail industries for, unfortunately, several decades. I've worked with a bit with boxcar, but most of my experience has been with intermodal and with converting actually truckload customers to intermodal.
Awesome. Paul, what about you, buddy?
I've been in the industry over 30 years. I began my career consolidating loads, truckload, then moving them to rail, and then I got involved in the rail industry, understanding mostly boxcar movements across the country, out of Idaho, Washington, California, Arizona, and moving them to the eastern seaboard. I was very lucky to work with a company called RailX for a number of years. Our specific purpose was to convert truck to rail, moving it from the Pacific Northwest and California into the Northeast and into the southern states. And from there, I've been in logistics with a local produce purveyor out here in upstate New York.
Awesome. Ted, how about yourself?
Hi, I'm Ted Brentz. I'm the founder and CEO of Tri-Cities Intermodal, which is actually a former RailX facility in southeastern Washington. I have been in surface freight transportation for over 45 years, worked in all modes, all aspects, and got into this business by accident at a Rolling Stones concert in Philadelphia. And they're still touring, and so am I.
That has to be one of the best introductions into the industry that I've heard in a long time. I've only got about 20 years in the industry, and mine's not nearly as cool as that story. I kind of just fell into it as well, working for Walmart. So would have been better at a Stones concert for sure.
Yeah.
But awesome. Well, thank you guys again for joining. Like I said, you guys, when I was thinking about doing an episode about intermodal and rail, the very first name that popped in my head was Bill. Obviously, I've known Bill for quite a few years. I know, he knows anything and everything there is to know about intermodal. And then Bill introduced me to Paul and to Ted, and I'm just super thrilled to have you guys on. Our audience is going to learn more today about rail than they probably were anticipating. So super excited. So let's talk a little bit about rail. So let's talk about the difference between rail versus intermodal for anybody who doesn't know. Who wants to take that one?
Yeah,
Well,
I can do it. Go ahead, Ted.
So I would say there's multimodal and intermodal. Multimodal is an end-to-end journey involving more than one mode. And the difference between multimodal and intermodal is that the intermodal load is containerized. So when we think about trailer on flat car, we think about containers on vessels, that's intermodal. If you think about bulk moving by barge or by rail, that's multimodal. Intermodal is one of the commodity groups that rails move. And they usually call it premium. It's increasingly lumped with the automotive sector, but it's the most price and service sensitive and most elastic and prone to change to truck than the other modes.
Right.
And then, of course, there's boxcar. So boxcar would be a little bit different dynamic, where both loading and unloading center has to be served by a rail system, either a class 1, class 2 short line system, into their buildings, and a method of loading and unloading boxcars. The differential, of course, with boxcar is that you can put multiple truckloads of inventory onto a boxcar and rate that moves the country. So, some refrigerated boxcars can fall up to 6,600 cubic feet for 180,000 pounds of product. So, heavy, dense product is perfect for boxcar, where a lighter load you wouldn't necessarily put in a boxcar.
Yeah. Excellent point. Excellent point. You don't have those weight restrictions that you have if you're going to OTR, right? So
Exactly.
And the crazy thing is, when I got into the produce industry about 6 years ago, I was blown away by how much produce moves on rail, right? A lot of people think that produce is just in time, and because it is just in time, and a lot of distribution centers and whatnot, they don't carry a ton of safety stock for most produce because of the shrink factor and all that fun stuff. They never think about train, right? It's always about just semi trucks, and so you guys want to touch on some of the we're going to be produce specific on this one. So you want to touch on some of the items that typically move intermodal and on rail?
Well, I mean, usually you want to stick with what they call the hardware items, and onions and potatoes obviously are good. We do ship quite a few apples; those run well. There's carrots, of course, all of those things, and then the citrus. Citrus will move easily on intermodal, and we've had. Depends on the length of haul, but the new containers are pretty sophisticated, and they maintain temperature just as well as a truck, if not better. They have the walls are thicker. Yep. They're designed for the long haul and to keep the product safe under extreme circumstances, and so there is some validity to the fact that that stuff does ride better on rail as far as the temperature is concerned. So it does open it up to more, fragile items. We try and stay away from stuff like cherries and berries and things like that are susceptible, because what you do have and you really can't get away from on intermodal is the vibration, and the vibration from the steel wheels is something that will affect, cherries and berries and stuff that will break down over time. Those we try and stay away from.
Anything that you would put on a team truck because of the viability of the produce itself would normally not be conducive to intermodal movements. However, your standard commodities, as Bill was saying, is really right up the alley for intermodal movements.
Yeah,
What's nice in intermodal is that the handling is reduced significantly in intermodal because the shipper loads the container and the receiver unloads the container. So you don't have that boxcar mentality where a shipper or a transloader will have to load their boxcar goes to another location where it's then loaded, unloaded, and then put into another form of transportation to get to the end user.
Yeah, traditionally, I've been in this business a long time. Intermodal looks to be truck plus one. So if the truck transit is 5 days, intermodal aims for 6. And for that, there's a price discount. One of the things that had been an issue for many years, isn't as much an issue as it was before, is there's legal truck and there's actual truck. So before the electronic logging devices came in, and you were still looking with the paper logs, it was like Smokey and the Bandit. You would go in, you'd see a place being loaded up, and it'd be one driver, and he'd say he'd be in New York in 3 days. So you just can't do that legally, but they were. So it is. There are not a lot of company drivers out there in the truck business. There are some, but on the produce specifically, those are owner operators. They're independents, and they are their own culture and the way of doing business. Right, wrong, or indifferent. It's been that way for me.
Absolutely. That seems to be why produce industry seems to be a little bit more broker heavy than asset heavy compared to some of the other commodities. And it's amazing when you actually break it down. Most of us, at least when I was younger, I'd see a Swift or a Knight driving down the road, and I thought that made up the majority of truck drivers out there. But to Ted's point, over 80% of truck drivers that are on the road are owner operators.
Yeah.
And I think that continues to go up, depending on where the market's at. It fluctuates a little bit, but, it's
somewhere between 85 and 90% of all trucking companies registered with FMCSA have less than 6 trucks.
Yeah. And that's crazy. It's crazy when you think about it. That's a lot of companies, but it's one of the few jobs out there where you can, buy a truck and buy a trailer and you can be your own boss for however many years that it's profitable.
Well, but that's part of the problem right now. What you're talking about, Cody, is the traditional definition of competition, that there are no barriers to entry. Yes, you can do that. But the problem is that a lot of people went out during COVID and bought trucks and bought trailers for ridiculous prices.
Yep.
And it used to be that didn't work out, you go down to the dealer, toss them the keys and walk out. Well, during COVID, with these crazy prices, people were putting up their retirement accounts or their houses. So what you have now is not a barrier to entry, you have a barrier to exit. And that's been an overhang to this business for the last 3 years, because you've got a lot of zombie truckers out there who just cannot keep going. The ATRI, American Trucking Research Institute, they do really good work. Rebecca Brewster and her team, they've come out and said the cost of a truck to operate is $1.80 a mile. And if it's reefer, it's going to probably be closer to $2. So you might ask yourself why you can get rates for 70 cents a mile.
Yeah.
That's the world turned upside down.
Yeah,
absolutely. That math doesn't work out in the long term.
No,
So.
and then and a lot of it too, you have the Uber Freight type brokerage platforms that are out there. And what those enable these guys to do is to keep being loaded. And it's a double-edged sword, because they're out there and they're not making the money they should. But I don't know if you have started to, the rates are starting to creep up, and I believe they're up transcontinentally almost double digits year over year to this year. And that is a very positive sign. And that would start to make those people like me who've been trying to sell intermodal make their job a little easier as things move forward, because we're starting to see those double or single, at least almost double increases in the freight rates. And you'll have we're going to have a lag, but it's getting there. And as things start to move forward, all of a sudden intermodal becomes a much more viable opportunity than it has been.
Yeah, it's as day follows night, contract follows spot rates.
100%.
The problem right now has been that contract rates for the last 3 years, they're not a commitment of freight. They're basically a ceiling on what the shipper knows he has to pay. So he can go out. I can't count the number of times we've been awarded freight, never got it, and then seen it on a load board.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So that's the market.
And it's typically, in a normal market, which I don't think we're in right now. Obviously, it's usually like a 6 to 8 month lag, right, between contract and spot, and it's all cyclical. As it goes up, one goes down, and as one goes down, the other goes up. And to Bill's point, as rates start to increase on the OTR side, you're gonna have a lot more opportunity on the rail side, because it starts to make more sense, right? Once those rates get crazy, any of us who lived through COVID remember some of those months where it was just like, is this ever gonna, is it ever gonna calm down?
Yeah.
And then it just dropped off a cliff in that February-March cycle. So it's pretty crazy, but it's going to be interesting. I think that it's going to be a trickle effect, though. Ted, to your point, there's a lot of people that are hanging on that in a normal market probably wouldn't have held on, but they probably have a lot more skin in the game than truckers who got into the industry 10 years ago had, and they could exit a lot quicker, or they could just go be a company driver. A lot of that happens too, right? If you're an owner operator and things get tough, you used to have the ability to just go sign on as a company driver, but a lot of the big companies aren't signing up drivers anymore. So,
there's some of that, but what you really see is you saw a lot of people, and again, looking at the number of motor carriers, tracking the number of motor carriers doesn't really give you a good representation of capacity, because somebody, I might have been driving for Billy yesterday. I'm saying, why should I give Billy 30% rates or high? I'll go become my own trucking company. And then became too much, and I worked for Paul. Well, there's no change in capacity, but you see number changes in the number of motor carriers. So it's the numbers are not absolute.
And I don't know how much, the caveat is that how much is actually going to come back. COVID changed a lot, especially buying patterns in the retail network. You have an adverse mentality of carrying inventory. And so with freight and truck being so cheap, mixer loads will come across the country 5 days a week. Their need is, I want, 5 pallets of this and 6 pallets of that, 7 pallets of that. And I want that to come in Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And that's how I'm going to buy that. I'm not going to look at creating a truckload order for this commodity or truckload order for this commodity and buying product once a week. So with that mentality,
that's catching up to dry. They've been doing that for 20 years.
So this is where you're seeing that particular model switch, and COVID also changed the fact that, and as far as the retailer is concerned, it's okay to be out of stock. It's not, I don't have to be full all the time. I don't have to offer everything to everybody. That was absolutely adverse 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if a retailer was out of stock on a particular commodity, that buyer's head would roll.
Yeah, that was a big problem. Big problem.
Yep.
But anyhow, if people wanted to move into intermodal, from a over the road perspective, what could they do? What should they do differently? I think that's one of the things we want to talk about today, right?
Yeah.
And
It's just there's a lot of brokers and carriers that are going to be on, in the audience right now. Sunny Sharma, going to give you a big shout out. You said good afternoon, all. Such as Sunny, Brandon. He said hi, Bill. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of brokers out there that, I've talked to quite a few customers that say, if you can master intermodal, you're going to be in our top 10% of brokers. Mm-hmm. That's just how it is. But there's a lot of brokers out there that think that they've mastered intermodal and rail and haven't even come close to it, because there's a lot of nuances to moving on rail versus finding a truck, right? I mean, capacity is plentiful right now, and anybody who got into brokering the last couple of years, especially the last 2.5 years, it's been easy, right?
There are asset-based carriers, very well-known, publicly traded truckload carriers that think they're in intermodal, and they're not. They cannot get their act together, because the real problem is there's one company out there, JB Hunt, everyone knows who it is. They're an intermodal company with trucks. Everybody else is a trucking company with intermodal, and it's not the same. And when you go to intermodal from trailers to intermodal, that's one thing. But to go from trailers to containers, it's another world entirely. And there's some people out there that have been in double stack for 30 years and still don't get it. Because if you can't manage the chassis, and if you can't manage all of those pieces, it just doesn't work. And no chassis, no wheels, no service.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And there's no DAT board that's going to solve that for you, like an OTR carrier, right?
Oh, there are a lot of vaporware companies that will sell you solutions if you don't want them to work.
Yeah. But it's got to come from connections and experience, right? I mean, that's the name of the game when it comes to rail. Yeah.
Well, what the customers or the brokers can do is improve the information flow. Because if you look at what has to happen for an intermodal load, I mean, a origin tray has to be booked. The crane has to be booked. The rail has to be booked. The destination has to be booked. Destination dray has to be booked. A lot of things have to happen. And so if people can just share this information well ahead of time and, be as complete as possible, try not to make changes if possible. And this is how you take advantage of that. The IMCs are trying to make this thing look like a truck. That's really what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And the closer you can get to looking like a truck, the more successful you'll be, at least for a lot of customers that haven't done this before or would want to do this. Another thing to do is to keep a percentage of your fleet always in intermodal, because that way you keep the processes in place and you're able to, jump in and out, or at least keep one foot in at all times. And then, when things get ugly. You need surge capacity. The trucking market goes crazy. You have the people in place. You have the process in place, and it's easier to turn to a higher percentage of intermodal. Way more moving.
The most
Samantha, thank
biggest
you.
difference between trucking and intermodal is that with trucks, thou shalt not move empty, right? That's commandments 1 through 10.
Yep.
Because basically the cost of moving empty is the same as the cost of moving loaded. That's not the case with intermodal. And Billy mentioned surge, imbalance. There are a lot of traffic lanes that are much more conducive to intermodal. So if you bring that trucking mentality in, you'll just do stupid things. If you don't understand that trucking is different, railroads are different, and that frankly, the culture of trucking and rail is different. It's not that one's right, it's one's wrong. They're different. And if you're not able to, stand astride that gap, you're going to have problems.
Mm-hmm.
See, Billy's very different now that he's worked for a railroad.
Ah.
That's what did it, huh?
It's the Vulcan mind meld.
So what's some advice that you would give to some newer brokers and carriers out there that would want to get into intermodal and rail, but have no experience?
The big thing is to get the be proactive. Think about, you got to plan ahead. You have to anticipate all these things that can go wrong and try to prevent them. And getting your information out there to your IMC partner is absolutely crucial. And intermodal is a pain in the neck. It can be difficult, but once you get these processes in place, it's just as easy as rolling with the trucks. And the thing is that most people that have trouble with it aren't doing it all the time. So just try, like I said, keep a percentage going all the time. Keep a couple people involved in this at all times. So there's always lanes that you're running OTR that you could be running intermodal. You can't run all of them for sure. Trucks aren't going to go away, but some of these lanes can run intermodal and run it successfully. And then things like drop and hook. You get a drop and hook program in place at origin, at destination. That's something that can really pay dividends to both your customer, your shippers, because you can load and unload these things when you have the capacity to do it, when your workforce isn't all tied up. Do it in the middle of the night, and then that helps out the dray guys, because you got to imagine the dray guys are picking these things. They have to go pick up a container, come to your place, wait in line, get loaded, leave your place, get back and try to make a train. And the OTR guys can leave your place and go to a rest area and go to sleep. The intermodal guys don't have that option. So a drop and hook program, if the box is there loaded, and you load it in the middle of the night, he drops off the empty, and then you repeat the same process the next evening. You just keep going like that. And the same thing can happen on the shipper side. And that there's a soft savings there. You'll realize some savings in your supply chain. And then the same thing on the delivery side. Your customer can, if they're all backed up in the warehouse, leave it at the ramp, or have it, put it out in the yard and have it sitting there running till they unload it. It's if you stay with the hardware items, that's never a problem.
Quality first, avoid intermodal amateur night. And there are a lot of amateurs and posers out there.
Good.
Quote the movie that came out 70 years ago. Yesterday, it's a one-way ticket to Palookasville.
So true.
Yeah. The other thing, if you have to live load and unload, what you can do to help these guys out, just help the dray guys out. Create a expedited door. If you can create an expedited door for your intermodal guys, that's a huge thing. And because these guys really are under the gun because they run out of hours. If you run out of hours, you miss the damn train. So that and then everybody's pissed off.
Yeah, and first come, first serve is not an answer. It's an excuse.
Yeah, so just try, if you set aside one door, if you're loading intermodals, make sure there's one door. When the guy shows up, he says, I'm pulling an intermodal. I know the drivers will be angry, but you've got to do it. It really has to, in order to make this program work. There's some things that have to be done that really helps. If you're not doing drop and hook, do an expedited door for either loading and or unloading.
That gap management is huge. It creates a lot of benefits if you're managing those gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's outline. So I'm a shipper, right? We'll say I'm a shipper and I'm looking at intermodal. What's the pros of intermodal? And then we can cover the cons of intermodal, if there are many.
It's I would say it's good for ugly freight, odd ways, imbalanced, out of whack, surge. If you're looking for protection, the bad things, Billy's touched on them. It's not for everyone. The geography's got to be correct.
Sorry, I got a 5-year-old that's photobombing me
Yeah, if
over
you're
here.
going from Chicago to LA, it's great. If you're going from Des Moines to Las Vegas, it doesn't work because you've got miles out of whack. So it nowhere. It's like anything else. It's got a sweet spot. Stay in that sweet spot. Don't take any adventures.
Yeah, I think I mean, consistency, I'd say, a lot of the intermodal guys want to keep these things full. They want to know that they're, for weeks in advance, they'd like to run the same run, in the same way trucks do, but the intermodal guys will probably hold the rate. And if you can get a rate in place, you can do a rate for a much longer time. And, if you're in the game with these guys and you need more capacity, usually it's there. They can add more, they can put more cars on the train, and they can take care of you during the peak periods of seasonality or ads or whatever. That's a big deal. That helps you out. And then again, the drop and hook program, so that you're able to maximize the efficiency of your warehouse, use the off hours, use the low peak hours, and make things run smoothly during your daytime hours. I don't know, what else? What do you got, Paul?
A drayman can handle that short haul. And so, as Bill was talking about, the capacity issue that a shipper can get during surge is drastically reduced by jumping over to intermodal. Yep. And you're managing that capacity better. And Bill already touched on it. You can negotiate a more consistent, longer term rate with an intermodal company.
Absolutely.
It's just hold up your end.
Yep. It is so much less volatile than
it is
OTR. Big time. I mean, the only wild card really is just fuel surcharge, right? That's it.
Yeah, normally.
Yeah.
Right, and that's usually outside the rate, although a lot of produce likes all-in rate. But right, Bill, most of the produce guys long-term contracts till next week, right?
Yeah. So yeah, they understand fuel at this point, but.
All right. So what's some of the cons that could potentially be there for intermodal and rail?
Inertia. You go and you talk to a customer and they go, "Oh, intermodal, yeah, we tried that. Charlie tried that 20 years ago. It didn't work. He got fired. We've never done it again."
Yeah, there you go. But delay. If that train is late, or if you're coming off ramp slow, you can miss a delivery window and you're delayed until the next day. Where a truck may be hours late, you can actually, that hours can become a day late on an intermodal container. And so, as Bill was saying, you're held up at your loading location. The driver is trying to make ramp, misses cutoff. It's going on the train the next day, where it's a blip to a truck driver. So it's that little bit of inconsistency can scare either a shipper or a receiver when they're shipping specific commodities at certain times of the year.
And a lot of it's managing expectations too. You have to know that there are certain things that have to happen, and they have to happen on time. Whatever is within your control, try and help out to do that. Make sure that these things can happen. And there is a chance of it being a day late as opposed to an hour late, and that is absolutely can happen. It's the railroads have gotten pretty good. I mean, anything can happen. There can be equipment failures, but there is a monstrous existing rail infrastructure in the United States, and it's been taken over. The trucks have really taken over so much of this freight that can be put back on the rail. A percentage of it absolutely can be put back on the rail very successfully. But you have to work within. You have to manage your expectations of your customer and manage your own expectations, so you don't have somebody screaming that get it here, because on the rail you can't get it there. It's going to be late. If it's going to be late, it's going to be late. But there are frequently, the other side of the coin is the rail is also frequently early, and people don't talk about that. And so the things are sitting there early sometimes, and you're able to deliver them early. So, just manage the communication as well, so everybody knows what's going on. There are, delays built into these schedules, and sometimes the trains don't have the delays. Right, Ted? Sometimes.
That's it. And speaking of which, I have to go talk to a customer to convince them to use intermodal. So I'm
There you go.
unfortunately have to sign off.
Thanks for joining us, Ted. We
Thanks
appreciate
for
it.
having
Thanks,
me.
Ted.
Appreciate it.
See you. Good luck.
So the other piece would be, the other negative could possibly be, is a weight differential. So you have rate, which normally is going to be less than truck, but in some instance we have some weight differentials to where a truck may haul 42,000 pounds of product and weigh out properly, weigh out legally. And the container may only be able to handle 40,000 pounds because of the chassis and because of the weight of the tractor itself. So, so overall you would be overweight and you'd have to leave product behind at shipping point. So, but I think they're getting a lot better. I think it's getting a lot better. I think that we're managing the amount of product that goes onto an intermodal container. And I think that overall, the differentials are getting much better.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, there's a lot of cons to intermodal if you can pull it off, or not a lot of cons, a lot of pros to it if you can pull it off correctly, right?
I think that, Billy's original statement was absolutely right. If you're managing those expectations with intermodal, it is very beneficial to move intermodal. Does it have the equal flexibility of a truck? No, it doesn't. But it's the management of those expectations and fitting that proper commodity into that gap. It's a win. It's a win.
Yeah. How about, so in your guys' years of experience, what's the claim ratio in intermodal? Because OTR, obviously produce, for anybody who doesn't move produce out there, claims are pretty high. That's why a lot of people stay away from produce. A lot of sensitive product on there, and every day that something's late, they're using or losing shelf life at the retailer. So how are claims when it comes to intermodal? And granted, apples, onions, potatoes, those are less claimed items than like a strawberry or a cherry or something like that. They're a lot more hardy, but there are still issues. At least from my experience, I was really good friends with one of the regional presidents for Carrier Transcold, and I can tell you what, the reefer units that go on rail cars at least are far superior to a reefer unit that's on just your cookie cutter 53, right? They hold temp better. The rail car itself is sealed much better. Less air coming in and coming out. So maybe just touch on claims really quick.
Yeah, I mean, as you touched base with the boxcar development for Carrier or Thermo King in the boxcar, a lot of engineering is done with a lot of the discharge return air temperature, how the walls are constructed, where the airflow is going. And they're larger units. They're larger units, more manageable units. I see that those container units, now you're still on par with a real good truck carrier. You're going to be managing those temperatures as they come across the country. So what the environment is. You're looking at the same type of movement. That's a return air, a discharge, what the ambient temperature is of the box on the outside. So what the environment of the product is. And as we alluded to earlier, you're looking at moving a lot of those hardware items, which are a lot less sensitive. So as far as claims ratio is concerned, the temperature issues I don't really see as far as intermodal is concerned. Sometimes we have some handling. If load is not secured properly at shipping point. That's where I see a little bit more of a claims
And what I did
exposure, right?
What I did with that, we tried to work with the shippers because that's really what it is. The actual units, the temperature claims are pretty rare, but we're talking about the actual. Brandon's asking if we're talking about reefer box cars compared to OTR reefer, and really
Yes.
what we're talking about are the containers versus OTR reefer, and the refrigeration units on them. They it's just the container's thicker, it's heavier, and that's why the weight starts to become a problem. But they are better insulated. But what I was saying is we had to work with the shippers to be a little more involved in the loading process because you don't have the dray guys are not the over the road. There's a lot of produce guys that really know what they're doing. They stand there as you're loading the truck. They watch every pallet. They pulp every pallet. Those guys, first of all, are fewer and farther between than they used to be. That used to be that's who was pulling the produce loads, and those guys they're as old as Paul and me. They're freaking almost ready to give it up. And driving trucks is a difficult job, and it's you're getting a lot of younger guys in there, and the older guys have phased out, and that experience is gone. And but the guys on the dock, your warehouse managers, your shipping manager on the dock, if you know you're shipping intermodal, pick a guy who knows what's going on and use him to load these intermodals and make sure that they're secured as they leave. Make sure they're loaded properly. And I worked with some shippers to do that, and our claims went from double digits to almost zero. We haven't had, and that is just something if you can be a little bit, again, be more proactive. And have when this thing comes in, know it's an intermodal load, be a little more involved with the loading, and lock that thing in. They have to be strapped. You can't use load locks because the things will flex and you'll lose them. They'll lose them at destination. But you use the net, use the load locks, make sure they're in there, use the dunnage so that you don't have the problems from shifting, because that's really where your claims will come in.
Yeah, great points. A lot of people only think about claims and produce when it comes to temperature, but there's definitely a lot of damage that happens too. So,
and most of it is avoidable.
Yep. And I mean, it definitely sounds like you have to be more in tune with your pickup and your delivery when it comes to intermodal than typical OTR. To your points, Bill, if it always helps if you can find somebody at that shipper that understands what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish, and somebody that's actually there to try and help you versus just another truck that shows up. And I'm not claiming that everybody does that, but we know it's out there, right?
No, I mean, these places are busy,
Yeah.
But then the advantage is you can do this intermodal. You can load them, if you got a drop and hook program, you can load them at night, take a little more care, and then you have no problems.
Yep. All great stuff, guys. I mean, there's definitely, it sounds to me like there's a lot more pros than there are cons. I mean, cons is really just kind of timeline, right? I mean, there's a little bit more
managing the timeline, managing the buy cycle. Is really the biggest con, but that's manageable.
Especially with the proper expectations. So, awesome, guys. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left. Is there anything that you guys want to touch on that we haven't touched on this subject?
We got a few. Is there any people in the audience that have anything they want to ask?
Any questions? Looks like Brandon asked if we were talking about reefer box cars compared to OTR reefer.
So I was talking about reefer box car. And so I was talking about reefer box car and then went into intermodal and OTR reefer. So when we were talking about the refrigeration units.
Yeah. And usually, though, the containers, the refrigerated intermodal containers do hold temperature better than a over-the-road trailer simply because they're heavily constructed in order to be stacked.
Right.
Yep.
So they end up inherently to be better, and they're designed to last longer. They're supposed to be.
Well, those box cars aren't getting holes poked in them with the forklifts. I can't count how many times I've personally done that when I was younger. So that happens all the time, right? And once you pierce that skin, it doesn't matter how they repair it. It's you're going to lose some thermal efficiency on it. So. But great stuff, guys. I really, really appreciate you guys coming on and sharing some of your knowledge. I'm sure I'm going to have you guys on here again in the future. Rail's something that we need to always be talking about, because as as the market shifts, rail is going to become more prevalent. Right now, hasn't really been the talk of the town because rates have been where they're at.
Right.
But as soon as capacity
Agreed,
gets
Cody.
tightened again,
Yeah.
it's going to be an option that people need to have. And and as a salesperson myself, if you don't have options like this in your back pocket, you're probably losing out on some opportunities for sure.
And even right now, that my best advice would be is to keep a toe in the water, keep a little bit moving on intermodal, figure out lanes of work, just so you know the people, you know the procedures, and you can talk intelligently about it to your customers.
Yeah, 100%. So real quick before I let you guys go, bust out those magic 8 balls. What do you guys think is going to happen the next 3 months and 6 months from a capacity and a rate standpoint out there? You guys think we're getting close to a turn? I keep hearing both sides of the coin, right? Like I hear that by December they're thinking that the market's going to turn, and then I'm hearing a lot of late Q2, early Q3 next year.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I certainly would like it. We need to improve it. Certainly, this rate structure has been, really below cost for so long. It's just I keep predicting it's going to change, and it hasn't yet. So I would certainly like to see things start to improve this fall. And you could have if you have a big storm or something, that's going to suck up some capacity, and a couple small events could really have a outsized impact on the freight market. And, that's what you need to watch out for, because that'll hit the trucks probably before it hits the intermodal. And if you're already tied up with the intermodal, you'd be in a safer position. You could hedge.
What about you, Paul? You're in freight day to day, buddy. What do you think?
If there's a good crop in the Pacific Northwest and California, you add the capacity, the freight rates will go up. The trucking freight rates will go up. You'll see a better differential to intermodal. You'll see an easier way of accessing the intermodal market. I wish I had the crystal ball. Every day of my life, I wish I had the crystal ball.
Everybody else
but as it stands, I think the trend is in that direction right now. I also think that there's going to be a challenge moving forward as far as mixer loads and number of drops are concerned, number of picks are concerned. So I don't see a welcoming of more and more picks on a truck. So
no,
I think that when that comes down to a 2-pick, then you're going to really be the intermodal is going to really shine.
Agreed.
So
awesome. And unfortunately that's produce for you, right?
Well, it's the truth. I mean, look at the buying pattern change that has happened just over the last 5 years, where you have a commodity like a carrot was always coming out of California, correct? Where all the packing carrot was coming out of California. That's now switched into the P&W, and now the Eastern Seaboard's handling a lot of the Eastern Seaboard stuff. So what was once a long haul out of California is now technically a regional move, from that commodity. And so there's more and more commodities that are being harvested on the East Coast for East Coast consumption that make it difficult for that long haul move. So we see those changes in retail and food service. We see more of a switch toward a further processed good, a value added produce good instead of a raw commodity produce good. So all of these are going to factor into what is that capacity going to be.
Agreed. I actually had a really good conversation with Kenny Lund from Allen Lund. I was probably a year and a half ago. I think it was a TIA or DATCON, one of the two. And he had actually told me his prediction was 10 years from now that Texas was going to be a larger produce producer than California, because it makes more sense, right? Logistically, it's in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
And they don't have water issues for the most part. Sometimes they have too much water. And it just, they got a lot of land over there for ag. So I think we are seeing that more and more and more. I think it was Dean from DAT had just released the produce numbers based on the USDA numbers for the last month, and produce out of California is down significantly. It's double digits from last year. And it's not just harvest, right? It's because they actually had water this year. So, the drought from 2 years ago was gone. They didn't have the flooding that they had last year. They really killed the crop. Right. So the demand just wasn't there.
Right.
Well, you have the regional production makes sense. It really does. When those products will grow and you can get the quality regionally, transportation's expensive and you increase your shelf life by the time you get to the retailer. It makes sense.
Absolutely.
And that's probably a big effect there. And, a lot of it's Mexico.
So I mean, really the challenge moving forward is just understanding that market, really getting entrenched and understanding not just what's going to happen in goods movement, but where are the goods coming from? Where is that consumption going to occur? And our data cannot catch up with that information. The data that's coming out of the USDA cannot catch up with that with that hands-on feeling. I'm looking at data that I had when we were looking at RailX and building a California facility. The consumption data I can throw in the garbage, and that data is only 12 years old, 15 years old.
Yep. And anything that includes COVID data, you might as well just throw that out the window.
Throw it out the door.
Yep.
So
awesome, guys. Really quick, if anybody wanted to get a hold of you guys and talk a little bit more about intermodal and rail, what's the easiest way to get a hold of you guys? Is it LinkedIn?
LinkedIn.
You can instant message me on LinkedIn or
awesome.
I'm very easy. Paul at capcityproduce.com.
There we go.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. We're going to wrap up here. And I've really enjoyed talking about this. You guys have taught me more about intermodal and rail in this 50 minutes that we've been talking than I've learned the last 6 years. So really appreciate it, guys. I'm sure the audience has
Thanks
as well.
for the opportunity.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Guys.
Happy to help.